Catastrophic Hurricane Idalia made historic landfall this morning, hitting Florida's Big Bend region where the state's peninsula and panhandle connect. Governor Ron DeSantis warned residents to hunker down as they brace for the storm. Let's listen.
The National Hurricane Center expects storm surge to reach up to 16 feet in some areas of the Big Bend region. That level of storm surge is life-threatening. Do not go outside in the midst of this storm. If it's calm where you are, it may be because you are in the eye of the storm, and those conditions will change very, very quickly. So wherever you are, hunker down and don't take anything for granted here. This is a very, very powerful storm.
Yesterday, President Biden said he and DeSantis were in close contact as Idalia took aim at the Sunshine State. Let's watch.
We're in constant contact. I had the director of FEMA in here today, earlier, talking about it. It's there's going to be, I think we're worried about the surge, the ocean surge. We don't know exactly yet. It's hour to hour we're watching this, but I told the governor that and the mayor and the regions that are likely to be hit first, that we're there as long as it takes. We're going to make sure they have everything they need.
Over 20 counties in western and central Florida were ordered to evacuate and shelter from the storm, which has been downgraded to Category 3 from Category 4, but not before it brought torrential rain, 130 miles per hour winds, causing widespread power outage and untold damage. Here's reporter Ryan Bass from our sister broadcast, News Nation, reporting from Tampa.
Officials are asking people, please stay off the roads. If you didn't evacuate, now is not the time to do so, even though we are starting to see this storm surge. By the way, you heard the director of emergency management, Kevin Guthrie, from the state of Florida here just a few moments ago on our air. He said we are already seeing 2 to 3 feet of storm surge here in the Tampa Bay area. And just to give you an idea, as I start to back up further and further, if I literally backpedal all the way to the street, I'm going to be in almost waist deep water from what we've seen coming over here on Bayshore Boulevard. So, Adrian Markey, we're going to have much more coverage here from South Tampa. This is some of the worst flooding we've seen, including Pinellas County on the other side of the bridge. And officials like Kevin Guthrie said that it's only going to get worse.
Idalia is expected to hit part of South Carolina by Thursday morning. Meanwhile, DeSantis, who, as we all know, of course, is also 2024 GOP presidential hopeful, has paused his campaign to focus on his state amid the Category 3 storm. This as he currently stands at about 13% support, according to the latest Real Clear Politics polling average, second, of course, to Donald Trump, who has amassed an average of 54%.
Yeah, so first off, I just want to say, I love when governors, I mean, obviously this is a horrible crisis that people are engaged in, but I do think that you see a more appealing, credible side of governors when they are in these kind of crises, when they're talking about real emergencies and working with the federal government to deliver for the people in their state. All of the awkwardness about I'm going to reject federal money on principle and all of that goes out the window when there's a real emergency. And it's nice to see it's the idea of a government where someone like Ron DeSantis is working with Joe Biden and the federal government to make sure the people of Florida stay safe. It's a nice break from all of the tension and the conflict just off the bat. Secondly, I mean, obviously on the tip of everybody's mind, on the tip of everybody's tongue, is the question of whether or not the increasing frequency, duration, and strength of hurricanes in the Atlantic is evidence of a climate crisis that is unavoidable, even if you live in a red state. In fact, states like Florida are specifically vulnerable to hurricanes. And what is the tension between what we saw on the debate stage last week when so many conservatives were unwilling to acknowledge that climate change is a man-made phenomenon, and the reality that the people of Florida, many of whom are conservative in a conservative state, are suffering from the consequences of doing nothing to address policy-wise the changing climate.
Yeah, look, I think the fact that human activity contributes or worsens climate change is pretty well established. And despite what we saw on the debate stage, actually, I think many Republican political officials, maybe it's not for whatever reason you're not going to acknowledge it on the debate stage, but do acknowledge it, or I mean, they should acknowledge it because it is the case. And we should try to take reasonable steps to lessen the negative impacts and to not to lessen the global rise in temperature with whatever policies make sense. That said, obviously there are hurricanes that are not a new phenomenon. I know some scientists argue that the extreme weather is getting worse. Of course, we have to reckon with the fact that we do have fewer casualties from extreme weather because we have a more technologically advanced society, which does also contribute to climate change. But it's a trade-off that people will debate. What is the right way to balance all of these interests?
Yeah, I mean, another interest is Florida homeowners. There was a recent piece in The Guardian, I saw this reported out in other places, about how home insurance prices are skyrocketing in Florida. I saw a Fox News host actually recently, I think a weatherman, explaining that it's almost impossible for normal people to live in parts of the state right now because the insurance premiums are so high. It is inevitable. It has always been, of course, the case that hurricanes existed in Florida, but there is something that is obviously reflected in the increasing premium prices that this is not business as usual. Something has changed that has made those parts of the country increasingly unlivable for people who aren't wealthy.
What is so wrong with that? Is the market sending a signal that this is not a good that this is a really expensive place to live, this is a dangerous place to live? Then it gets de-incentivized and people can live elsewhere. Is that such a bad thing?
If people who used to be able to live in their hometowns can't live there anymore because their insurance premiums are too high and their homes keep getting destroyed by hurricanes, is that a bad thing?
I mean, it's a big country. There are areas that'll be more affordable. I mean, we should not subsidize people living in likely flood destructive zones, right? That's more costly for the whole.
I'm not arguing that should be the case. I'm arguing that we can do something to stop the increasing encroachment of climate catastrophes, and we should do that because what we're basically saying is we're allowing oil companies.
I thought you were advocating an intervention into the insurance market.
No, what we're doing is those homeowners are internalizing cost and subsidizing big oil and gas polluters in these industries who are able to make it so that they don't have home value anymore. They have to pay premiums because of the behavior of polluters that aren't made to pay the consequences of that because it's too attenuated from what they've actually done to the environment. So that's the problem. And I do think that there are a whole lot of, increasingly we're going to be people who feel firsthand the impacts of climate change in a nonpartisan way. I mean, Republicans and Democrats are all going to be hit by the same wildfires and floods and storms. And I wonder how that's going to affect people's attitudes toward climate change when it's so personal and not this abstraction projection into the future. We saw during the GOP debate the company that was monitoring people's favorability as they watched using the dial system, there was that huge fall off when there was a denial of climate change, even among especially among independent voters. So, obviously what's important to focus on now is the impending tragedy. I hope everybody is able to stay safe and listen to Governor DeSantis' warnings and not engage in any risky behavior and take this hurricane in particular very seriously. But there is definitely a longer political question to be had about what to do to protect the interests of the people that are living in that state.
We will have more Rising right after this.